Okay, good evening, everyone. Call this planning board meeting to order. Okay, first order of business this evening would be the approval of the draft minutes from April 15th. Anybody have anything?
I just had one thing on page 3. That's Roman 7. It says Russ asked if the language would allow all-purpose storage plan to reduce runoff velocity and pollution. And I think what I said, as asked if this language would, for example, just if we added, for example, it's
Yeah, so where do you want, for example, to be?
would allow, comma, for example, the all-purpose storage plan to reduce.
And that's on page 3, Russ.
Roman numeral 7. Okay, anybody else? Hey, Jim.
Sorry.
I have none.
None.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay, Carter, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes.
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 Yes. Okay, and it's approved. Next order of business is invitation for a public comment. And I do not see, we have any public comment. Randy, you're here for the hearing. Wilson here, yep. Okay. Hearing. So tonight we have a hearing starting now at 7:05. So our public hearing, we have posted, and we are having for our master plan chapter updates. And so for the record, we've been working on these updates for the master plan for the last couple of years. And I will just read a quick note about what they are and why we're here and why we're having the hearing. So the pursuant to RSA 674 and 675, 674.4 and 675.6, the planning board will hold a public hearing on the proposed zoning amendments of the Town Temple Master Plan. The following chapters have been reviewed and amended to reflect current conditions: natural resources, economic environment, population and housing, land use, and implementation. So the planning board is by law required to have a public hearing on these master plan updates. And like I said, we've been working on these for a few years now, as well as help with from Carol Ogilvy and our HOP grant steering committee that did a lot of work to compile the information and the data. I think Russ, you were on that, were you?
Yes.
Carter, Russ were on that steering committee. And so a lot of work went into it, a lot of thought, and basically in a nutshell, it was just updating to the current times. And it was to it was housekeeping in a lot of cases. But for an example, the natural resources was last time it was updated was in 2003 and 4. And the land use had not been updated since 2003. So we're 20 plus years since that had been done. So it was certainly time. And for anybody that doesn't know, that's one of the tasks that the planning board has to do. Is we're supposed to look at yearly our master plan and see where, if we're keeping up and if we're up to date. So we did, and we have, and it's been good. And I don't think we've really had any opposition to the changes. So I guess I don't really have much more than that. I was expecting public comment, unless Randy, unless you want to add to that? Yeah, yeah, I mean, we have a few more minutes here, but we're allotted to that time. I don't know, does anybody else want to say anything about all the updates and like you on the steering committee, what you guys did?
I think a lot of what we did really, as you said, is housekeeping. We just updated statistics and data for this year and last year. So population, housing, land use, all those things are just really statistical data that we kind of pulled together.
Yeah, we took the statistical data and we also kind of we reviewed many of the chapters, just reading through them, adding comment, updating things as necessary. I think there was a whole section on goals and responsibilities and how that was assigned to different groups in the town, that we spent some time going through and updating so it reflected current status, because I don't think those had been updated since 2009. That's the last time, right, Bruce? Yes, so that information also went into the master plan. And then we had the consultants that we worked with for a year with the HOP grant committee to rewrite some of those chapters, gather and update the data, and in order to present it in the master plan. So we're very happy to have wrapped up all that effort and to be able to have a current master plan that has been reviewed.
Yeah, was IBM part of that with?
And
Carol?
yes, we had
Ivy.
Carol and Ivy
Ivy.
as our consultants that did a lot of the legwork in finding the right data out there to update our information.
Jeff from Moosewood.
Yeah,
Natural
and
Resources.
Moosewood,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah, along with-
conservation committee did
Right.
a lot of work, that wasn't
On the natural resources.
on the natural
Yeah.
resources inventory that was completed, which was all new information that we had.
Yeah, I think if anybody wanted to really, if they could compare the old master plan introductions to all those chapters, and then, because I did it earlier this evening. And I printed them out, but all the introductions, if you just read them from 20 years ago and then read them now, you can tell that, we've updated.
Yeah.
They were
More current.
well written and we're for the times now. So. Anybody else? Yeah. Well, technically, we're supposed to,
Did somebody bang in? I
Yeah.
had a bang.
Yeah.
it could be Carol, because Christine was gonna invite Carol to try it out. And Randy, you were a part of a lot of those chapters back 20 years ago. Yeah, the last couple, yeah, exactly. Well, so technically the hearing is supposed to go till 7:30. And I guess I don't know if we just don't close the hearing, but we could move on to other things on the agenda. And if anybody shows up that would like to discuss any of that, the hearing is technically still open. I think
Yeah.
that's.
Yep, that works.
Okay, so just remind me at 7:30, guys, somebody to
Yeah.
Right.
close the hearing. Okay, so work session with Southwest Regional Planning Commission, Sarah Bollinger's here again. Hello, Sarah. How you doing? You can come closer if you want, and the microphone's right there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, is that on? No, it'll be a green light.
There we go. Now it's on. So I guess we'll start by looking at the site plan review stuff. I wasn't planning on spending too much time on this tonight because it seems like we're pretty much wrapped up. So rather than going through piece by piece, unless you'd like to, I did really kind of dramatic highlights this time so that you can see but not actually read in printed form. The dark green highlights are the new language that hasn't been fully approved by you guys yet, but it was discussed at the last meeting. And the new yellow sections are all of the things that were discussed and approved at the last meeting. The only big change is that the glossary was added to the end, and it now also contains a provision for steep slopes, which we set at 25%. And so your next steps with this would be, I guess, one, determining if you're content with all of the revisions as they stand, and I can send you guys a clean copy, or you guys can clean the copy, either way, and then have your legal review done, and then public hearing. We'll also comparing it against your application to make sure that everything is still correct. I think your checklist needs to be altered just a little bit to reflect some of the changes, you know, particularly the stormwater changes and the landscaping changes. And I did kind of start going through that on my side. I can just send you what I've done if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, definitely. Sure.
Okay, so did anybody have anything they wanted to do or say on that? Or should we move on to the real meat of the evening?
Well, I guess so. Do we want to address site plan first? Because that should be a quick conversation, I think. Is that what you? So
Sure.
So you're saying the green is kind of what we talked about you were gonna add last.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we've already kind of asked. This is what they wanted.
rather than use all that ink, I literally just printed the pages that had the green.
So
I'm
the
looking at it.
first change,
Like I'm not putting.
Yeah, so it's literally page 6, 10, 22, and I think there was one other. Was it an RSA reference or something on one?
Yeah,
One of the other-
section.
Or section, yeah. So I did read it, and I feel like that's what we talked about.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the changes all make sense and read clearly and well, so. I'm happy to move forward. We still have to have legal review this, so.
right.
So we'll be revisiting it again in the future. Would you guys feel more comfortable if we just walked through each change, or?
Yeah, do you want to just
Sure.
the page 6, 10, 20, whatever,
yep,
do you mind reading them out?
section 5E on page 6. This was the one that discussed pedestrian and vehicle movement on a property. The new language reads, "The proposed use and design layout shall strive to comply with the Town of Temple's Complete Streets policy in order to ensure, 1, the transportation system functions as safely and efficiently as possible, and 2, there is a balance between the need for safety, resilience to changes in weather and climate, and concern for maintaining a rural atmosphere." And those were taken directly from your Complete Streets policy and provided by Christine.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, and the next one is page 10. Give me a moment to figure out what section we're in. We are in section P, which begins on page 7. So it's P4E. And it's just the addition on the end of the use of recognized practices. So the whole thing now reads, "Stormwater designs shall use practices known to be effective in New Hampshire. Applicants are encouraged to consult technical resources such as the New Hampshire Stormwater Manual. The planning board may request additional review if a proposed practice is experimental or proprietary or not consistent with the New Hampshire Stormwater Manual."
Yeah.
And then at the bottom of that same page, under clause G regarding snow storage and winter conditions, an additional sentence was added. Applicants are encouraged to utilize Green Snow Pro certified contractors and implement certified best management practices to reduce salt use, protect water quality, and minimize environmental impacts from winter maintenance activities. I'm sorry, this is so hard
And
to
I think
read.
that's what we had agreed that, I think that's why the word encouraged.
Yeah.
It's not shall, it's
Right.
just, we encourage you
Right.
to use that practice, right?
That's good.
And then page 12. We're on 5Q1G. That's a mouthful towards the bottom of the page. This is in landscaping and screening standards, and it was just adding a reference to section 5Q2, the specific standards for tree and ground cover. So just referencing back earlier in the,
Yep, that makes sense.
then,
Page 22, right?
yep. And so this whole section at the end, section 15 is a new section, but the only new language there is for steep slopes on the final page. And it says any area with a slope of 25% or greater as measured over 100 horizontal feet.
And I'm trying to remember the conversation. I'm pretty sure we all agreed on the 25%, but we had examples that we
Yeah.
used at
Yeah.
the last meeting.
I think we were looking at 20 and 25, and that's pretty common,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it kind of runs a range depending on the communities. It usually begins at 15% and it usually tops out at 25, but occasionally I've seen it as high as 30, although that's quite unusual. But when there's a 30% restriction, it's usually in the zoning ordinance, and that would be a no-touch zone. Like, they don't want anything happening if the slope is above 30%. So I think 25 is a good starting place for you guys, and see how it works for your community, and you can amend it as time goes by.
Good. So that was pretty much it for the site plan. So is everybody okay with all those changes?
What's our next step?
it has to go to legal,
Legal.
and then we'd have to have a hearing, right?
Yep.
And then there are updates, you said, to the checklist that need to,
I think maybe 2.
okay,
I'll send you guys, well, I'll send Kathy
okay.
what I've put together, and you can, because did you create the last
Yeah,
application?
I think probably I would think a bunch, because I think they all referenced like this section.
Yep.
That section, so I'll probably have to update the section references.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do my best with it, and I'll make sure you get it and you can finish it off. Yeah, and the only other thing, which isn't a content change, but you may have noticed that the numbering scheme changed, well, really the letters in the general standards, because there had been a placeholder where landscaping used to live. But then I moved landscaping to the end, and then I omitted, it was like letter M or L or something like that. So just for the purpose of, if you read our earlier notes on this, you're going to be like, this doesn't really make sense. That's why.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to the engagement strategy. I guess with this, I should say that I was able to speak to Pam Kingston this afternoon. So after I wrote this and sent it to you guys to get an impression of what worked in the previous round of HOP outreach. And pretty much the first thing she said was that nothing really moved over the summer, and there was no significant engagement that they were able to muster until the Harvest Festival. And then the Harvest Festival was a really good opportunity in signing community members up for individual interviews that happened in September and October, I'm guessing. And I don't think individual interviews make sense for what we're working on at this juncture. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that, but I also don't know that we have the manpower to try to conduct 50 individual interviews as they did last time in the last round. So did you do several?
We did it, we did
quite a
many
bit.
interviews. Pam did the bulk of them, and I would agree, it's very time intensive. And Kathy
Kathy
did a bunch,
Yeah.
and Russ did some, and like,
Yeah.
I would not recommend that as,
Well,
um,
and while 50 is a big number, it's
it-
also
it's
only a
not, though.
small number of community members,
Yeah.
right? And so, what I'm thinking is, I don't know, and help me calibrate this, because Todd and I did some more brainstorming after the fact as well. You guys don't do Old Home Days in Temple, do you?
No, Harvest
Okay.
Festival is pretty much our,
That's your big event.
well, and Memorial Day parade and 4th of July is a big,
But that's usually just, that's a small
yeah, it's true.
sample size.
Yeah,
No, Harvest Festival is.
it. That's our
Yeah.
day here.
Okay, so I was thinking, I guess if we kind of go through,
Can I ask a question?
yes,
I guess what would be, so with the with the first phase of this, when we went to do the interviews, we were trying to make some relatively large changes, right, in the zoning.
Yeah.
And to talk to people to understand what the town was looking for, and I guess I'm not sure. I think that these changes are as significant, maybe they are, but we also don't know what the changes are, so.
right.
Because we haven't discussed that, so.
Right.
I'm just wondering, like, what level of engagement we do need from people.
Mhm.
Is something like the Harvest Festival enough of a touch point, because we will get people there,
Mhm.
and engagement, or does it require to go much deeper than that?
I think we can go a little bit deeper, just
Yeah.
to kind of get people interested in the
Okay.
work and re-engaged. And so I was hoping, because libraries usually expand their programming pretty significantly during the summer,
Sure.
I was hoping we might be able to put a display up at the library that could just hang out there for maybe mid-August till the Harvest Festival, or all of August, whatever they're willing to do. I haven't been in your library, so I don't know how much space there is in there to accommodate something like this.
It's
And so
it's right there. It's very, it's
Yeah.
not the
I
largest
saw that
place.
it's a tidy little
Yes,
space.
yeah.
And I imagine it's packed because it's a library,
Yeah.
and that's generally. So
But
I
I
don't,
think that's a good idea, right? To get, because there's probably the most foot traffic.
Well,
Through
town clerk,
the town clerk.
registry, the select
Yeah.
office, town clerk, and tax collector all have the same office.
Yeah.
okay,
And they're 3 days a week. There's a lot of people registering their cars.
Yeah, that's a good.
I was beyond.
And you're kind of standing there, and
Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
might as well
Yeah.
do something.
well, we could do both,
Yeah,
and we could either have, duplicates of presentation materials, or have them in one place and move them to the other place. Or, I mean, what do you guys think would be?
What are the material, like when you're saying the material, like
Right.
what do you envision being there for?
What I'm imagining are 3 poster boards, and it could potentially be more concise with that. And then a 4th item that's collecting opinions. And I say item because it could be a box and people put cards in it, or it could be a board where people put Post-it notes, or a big blank sheet of paper and people write their comments. Because I think it's useful that everybody sees what everybody else is thinking as well, which is why I'm not loving the box idea, but it takes up less space if space is an issue. And so one board would show what the ordinances currently allow. Another board would show pictures and aerial shots and maps, or some combination of that, of where these exist in the community right now. So people can say like, oh, what we have right now does or doesn't hurt, or, I'm sure they may or may not have an opinion. And then the 3rd panel will show whatever we come up with, what we're proposing for people to react to. And that's what, the comment board would be is what is your reaction to this? And hopefully it gets people talking before the Harvest Festival. So then they'll have an opportunity to revisit those boards and like, I guess I'll be at the Harvest Festival this year, so I hope I get the date soon. And, with that, we'll have a mailer that goes out probably in advance of the Harvest Festival, but possibly following the Harvest Festival. I think there's the budget to do both, because your mailing budget is pretty significant. And I don't know, and Kathy could probably speak to this, but does the town have a bulk mail permit that the planning board is able to use to send mailers?
We get a better rate. I know that.
Hey, Bruce, I just want to jump in. 7:30.
7:30? Okay.
Oh, do you want to close your public hearing?
I do, yeah. So I officially close the public hearing on the master plan updates here at 7:30.
So when we've worked with other communities, we've worked with Silver Direct over in Swansea, and they do the every door delivery mail. I think that's what it's called, EDDM. And that's a pretty reasonable rate, but you have to have somebody, I believe, who has a permit to do it. I don't know if you could just do it yourself, because when I've tried to run through it on the post office website, it's a little bit weird. It's very affordable, but even with that, and you don't have that many addresses that you'd be sending it out to. I think it's,
I think we've done it in the past. Christine would remember. I know it's about $400 to mail out to the, what do we put, 500
Yep.
houses,
I
500.
think we did that for
That's
the
a-
house stuff. The steering committee, we mailed.
Got some- so
We did a mailer.
I was
right?
supposed to,
Yeah.
just went up another nickel this week, I
Yeah.
think. But yes, it's 450, something like that to hit
Yeah,
the whole town
Yep. And,
with just a postcard.
right.
and did that include your printing too?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
that was separate,
Okay.
but I could be wrong. I don't know. Such as
I think,
postage.
what I estimated was with the printing that we recently did for another community, they were large postcards and it came out to about $1. Well, actually it was less than that. It was closer to like 80 cents per address using
maybe it
Silver
is.
Direct's thing, but that was, black ink, colored paper, they had little add-ons, and I don't know where we want to land, but your budget for advertising and mailing is $5,000. So you've got a lot of.
We can send 2
We could
mailings.
probably.
You-
$500.
Right, you could
postcard.
probably send a lot of mailings,
Sure.
and so that's something to keep in mind. So I think it could be advantageous to send something out that's like maybe a little bit smaller in advance of the Harvest Festival, so people know to look for this project at the Harvest Festival, and then follow it up with more detail that's actually outlining where we're at in the process and what's being proposed precisely, so that people will have questions when they come to the forum and good feedback.
Okay. I like the idea of trying to set up some like self-serve engagement in advance rather than trying to get to some of these smaller events. I just don't think
Yeah.
it's worthwhile, and there's a lot going on in the summer. I think we even tried, Wes, correct, we had a couple like events, but they were
Yeah,
not significant turnout, so.
we had like 7. One of them we had here was like 7. people or
Yeah.
something. I think it was
So
most of
like,
us.
well,
Right.
is this worth it?
Right, and in the summertime, who wants to
Yeah,
go to an event that's not recreational?
right,
It's.
Right. so,
And then the other piece of that, so we've got town hall and the library. Do you think there's any benefit to dragging the boards to any of the monthly potluck dinners? Like, what is the atmosphere there? Would that be something that would not?
I think they get more than 7 people there. That's for sure.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's.
Do any of you guys attend that event and could
I-
drag the
I've-
boards?
I haven't been for years, but I think that they get pretty good, 10 or 15 people usually when they have them, don't they?
I think they had over 30 at the last. one.
Okay,
Really?
yeah, yeah, so that's probably a good idea.
Okay,
It's gonna
there's,
cost a lot of people.
there's also like the Ladies Aid does a soup lunch once a month. And there's usually like 20-ish people there. I don't know if it's worth
The
bragging
ladies
the
soup
words
lunch?
there. but,
Okay, well, where do these events occur?
Friendship Hall, which is
Okay,
the church hall next door, right?
It's a
okay,
room about the size of this.
okay. Okay, and is that owned by the town?
Sure.
It's the church,
Yeah.
okay.
But we have a lot of town functions, not a lot,
Okay.
but several a year in there.
Well, maybe if the potluck and the ladies soup luncheon are, I don't know, around the same time of the month, if they're the same week, they'd allow it to be set up for the whole week in that space.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Or something like that, so that it's not a big lift, but it creates more exposure.
Right.
Do you know what the ladies soup lunch is called? Is that just all that it is?
No,
Or who's
no,
in charge of it?
They call it like the soup lunch.
Super, right?
Super.
So you
Super.
apostrophe R,
Oh,
super.
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that, yeah.
something clever. It should be on our town website calendar.
okay.
So maybe leave everything at the town office for the most part, all set up, like with the big map is and everything.
Whether at the town clerk's office.
Town
yeah,
clerk's
yeah.
office, because everybody goes there and then whatever, once a month, bring everything up here.
To the events,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the library's probably too, that'd be kind of crowded to have 3 boards and a.
Yeah, I feel like you'd have to
Yeah.
scale it down to fit it in the library.
What is the square footage of wall space are talking? You know, for these boards, are they
Well, I haven't made them yet, so they
Okay.
could be,
could be anything
I mean, I was kind of envisioning like 20 by 30, but they could be smaller than that.
20 by
So 3 plans, you know, like a survey plan.
20 inches by 30 inches,
Yeah,
so 2 foot by 3
it's
foot.
3 easels.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, so-
yeah, I was envisioning
so
3 eagles.
320 by 30. I think we could make that work out. It's a little crowded down there, but I think.
But again, it can be calibrated because, I've started like roughing them out, but I haven't actually created them yet. So there's still time to make them smaller. Or bigger. No, we can only print, well, we can print as wide as 4 feet, but I don't think you want anything that big.
No. but Sounds like that. You can make it work.
Okay, so unfortunately, I have a chart and I have a list that's in the memo, which is making it difficult for me to go through here. So I guess, we should work off of the chart for now, because this is the document that I'll continue to edit, and I'll have another copy sent over, the engagement. I'll have another copy ready before the next meeting, so you guys will have an opportunity to have more input and we can finalize it, and then, I'll give that to Christine so she can send it off, because I believe she'll be the one that sends it. I don't know. Because, yeah, I believe she'll be the one. Okay, so following the summer activities, which I feel like we've just kind of nailed that down. After I spoke with Pam, she said that the public forums and public engagement after the Harvest Festival, they got the best response on a Thursday night in October and a Thursday night in November. Now, that like Thursday night in November seems tight to me because, one of them will be Thanksgiving, obviously. And then following Thanksgiving, it seems like everybody goes into Christmas mind and they don't come out for meetings unless they really don't like what's happening. So I guess my question is, what do you think would suit your community best in the way your community engages? Definitely weeknights, definitely not weekends. Oh, one of the ideas was to potentially, if your agenda is light, piggyback on a planning board meeting and have one of the public forums happen at a planning board meeting in October or November.
I definitely think weeknights were best. We did try a weekend Saturday morning event with the HOP grant committee, and there was not a great turnout. And I think that piggybacking on a planning board meeting is helpful
Yeah.
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
our perspective, but And
It'd be helpful too, because we'd all be there.
yeah, we'd all
Yeah.
be there and
Mhm.
it's already in the schedule and I think that that makes sense.
Yeah.
And moving forward, looking at our agenda and, you know, everything we have, old business, new business. We're actually finally, for the first time in 3 years, I think, lightening up a little bit, because we've really been overloaded. So we would have some time, maybe.
Right.
I say that, and 4 builders are gonna
Or,
come in,
yeah.
320, or, you know, 4 20-lot subdivisions, and, yeah, the world's gonna. No, so I think we probably could do that, I agree,
Yeah.
fit it in the fall.
And I can't remember, one of those forms that we did have in October or November. I'm trying to think if it was a forum, but Ivy hadn't gone, she went through a whole presentation, like showing pictures and
Yeah,
explaining changes and before getting a lot of input. So there was like, it wasn't just, we have a public hearing and here are the
Right.
changes. It was a more of a presentation. It was visual, and things like that,
That was over there.
that was over
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
right?
yeah. I remember.
And I think that
That wasn't the planning board night, though, because
that was a Thursday
Yeah.
thing.
I did go to that one.
Was that well received?
Uh,
I think there's a lot of people.
There were a lot of people and I think the comments that we had were good. Comments and questions, but you know, a lot of times people just want to like hear what is going on and they're not necessarily, I don't feel like engaging unless they're very upset about something,
Right.
right? So I'm just trying to think back to that meeting.
That was a good meeting. It was 20 plus people there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
Food.
We had food.
the transcript ledger was there. And I
Oh.
made the front page of the ledger for that.
Oh, yeah.
And you were in the background.
Yeah.
So we're on the cover of the transcript.
Yeah.
That's why I remember that meeting.
Right.
But I mean, we got the paper to come out.
That's
You know?
great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I think that was successful. It wasn't a planning board night, but I feel like the content that we had to present. It wasn't like, well, review this in advance and come and comment on it yourself. It was like, come and learn about the changes we're proposing.
Well, do you think that, you know, like I'm envisioning one of the evenings will be come and learn and the other one will be like very driven towards tell us
Yeah.
what you want to see different.
Yeah,
Or should it be 2 come and learn nights that section is very brief and leave a lot of time for public input?
I think before we had one night that was Ivy gave all the top lot, we had a little bit of. comment
Yes.
afterwards. Then there was more of another meeting.
Yeah.
where Everybody came and after they digested that, kind of,
And that worked well.
I think so.
yeah. I mean, it's always hard to get people out twice, but
Yeah,
I think it's good to have some time for comments.
I
in-
totally
in
agree with you.
that Meeting.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I agree.
guess that the content of what we're talking about though, PRDs and workforce housing is gonna bring more people out, say, than the master plan.
I
You know?
would think so.
You would hope, you would
Yeah.
hope so.
So
Yeah,
I would suspect we're gonna be a lot
Yeah.
better attended.
Yeah,
yeah.
and probably, right, more opinions on
Yeah.
what we should be doing.
I agree with that statement. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how to answer your question.
Well, we
But
can.
I think it makes sense to have like a good presentation and then with some commentary and then here's what we're going to change and get feedback specific to that.
Did you guys have breakout groups at the other?
We tried
Meetings.
that in some prior meetings, like the one that we had on a Saturday, we had breakout groups, and we did that a few times, I think.
Was that well received?
Yeah, I'm not sure I thought it was the most effective, but,
Okay.
we got a lot of comments, in those sessions. Were you at that one, Russ, where we were scribing?
Because I can nix that and we can just have a presentation and a dialogue. if that,
Yeah,
is-
I think the town might be on a little bit of fatigue from like, come and do a breakout on.
Well, we
We've done that many times.
What was it,
Yeah.
4 years ago, we did the charrette?
Yeah,
That was well received. We had 6 tables of 8 people, it was in 2 sessions.
and we tried to recreate some of that, I think, with the HOP grant, some of those sessions. And I wouldn't say it wasn't well received, I'm just not sure. It gave us the most.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I
Input.
think the content didn't captivate.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
what we were talking about in the steering committee, everyone's like, yeah, am I gonna waste Saturday? Talking about this? Probably not,
Right,
but this will probably be a lot more attended, so. I think maybe the presentation and then some question and answer thing, because maybe like the next time. More of a, now everybody comes back and they have some big questions, and
Mhm.
you're here to kind of respond to that. Inform more.
what was the last word?
Inform,
Oh.
like provide more details, provide
Yeah.
some additional information or,
Well, and this will also be different from that because the last round of HOP work was very broad. You know, it was informing your community about the housing crisis, informing the community about the role that Temple can play in resolving things or easing up a bit, at least within your own town limits, and, you know, help people who live here or want to live here. Whereas this is, it's going to be very specific. You know, we're going to be talking about the PRD changes and we're going to be talking about workforce housing changes. And I feel like because it's less broad, it will be easier for people to have opinions about it. And, you know, because when you're just talking about like, what if we allow duplexes everywhere? People just imagine that there's going to be a duplex on every 2 acres of land in the town, which of course that's not what happens, but it's too broad to really wrap your mind around in a lot of cases. And, you know, with this, I'm hoping we can make it something that is very specific and people will not be afraid of it and they will come out in support of it because they'll feel like they've been a part of the process and it's not going to tear your town apart. You know, because this is not going to be a 100-unit structure over there. Like that's,
And we have examples, we have a history of PRDs in our town.
yeah, I found a map somewhere on the website that shows
Yeah.
the
Yeah, there's several-
PRDs.
There's several of them, and Randy, who was just here, did the very first one. And one of the larger ones, but yeah, we've had, there's a handful of them.
Yeah.
But workforce housing, we haven't.
Do you have anything that might be like illegal workforce housing, like anything that, well, your ordinance doesn't really spell out
what would
much.
that look like, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, do you have anything that, I mean, I feel like there's a turned around behind me over here. I feel like there's a structure that looks like it's a multifamily that's more than 3 units.
Yeah, Matt owns
That's
it.
How many units do you have there?
3 rental units, plus the restaurant.
Oh, there's a
And-
restaurant
and-
over there too.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Well, that's not going to be a good picture for the thing because it's
We-
mixed use.
Correct.
We have, on the planning board, we have a different board, I'm probably one of the only ones left, or maybe George, but years ago. One of our members had done a mock workforce housing in a PRD
Mhm.
for a chunk of land down the road that abutted near yours, George. I think I saved, bless you, I saved his work. I have to
Oh.
dig it out somewhere, but it showed how you could build these 4-unit buildings. But you had to have the open space and
Yep.
how it could be done. Versus 3 acre.
Right.
And he did a good job with it. It wasn't well received. And that's why the board turned over the next couple of years, because it wasn't portrayed the right way.
Yep.
So that people got scared.
Well,
So that was 6, 7, maybe 8 years ago. But it was the whole idea of having anything but a single family home built
Right.
Scared a lot of people.
I I can't think of though, anything in town that's more than 3.
That's what I was
units.
gonna ask, if you have any 5-unit buildings in town, because that's what the
I
statute
mean, not that. I
allows.
But
No,
could be.
yeah, we have like schools, 3 units,
The
Pat
school,
has.
3,
Sneidern.
that's 3.
Yeah.
Can't think of anything more than 3.
I can't think of them either,
Mm.
but this well, I guess what people don't understand is our PRD, when our workforce housing, you could build a
Yep.
4 or 5 unit building
Yep,
on a parcel of land. It's just that you have to have the right amount of land to make it work. And I'll see if I can grab that draft. that
yeah,
you-
yeah, if you can find
you
that,
did, and,
certainly, because then we'll know what people are afraid of. That'll be our starting point.
yeah. Yeah, the big thing's always been no town water, no town sewer, so it's just, it's one of those things, you gotta put a septic, you have to have well and septic.
Yep.
Private well and septic for a 5 unit building and.
I think it would honestly be helpful if we saw examples of other communities similar to us and how they do that. And, or do they not, right? Like, is then.
Well, they don't do it specific to workforce housing.
Okay,
Most communities that are, lacking public infrastructure, their workforce housing ordinance, if they have one at all, because many don't have one on the books, is pretty similar to yours.
okay,
It basically just says we follow the statute and designates an area in town where it's allowed to happen, and so you guys have it in the PRD ordinance, which really, I mean, most of the district where PRDs can be built, that's what, rural residential or residential agriculture. Sorry, I can't
Yeah,
remember the
the-
names of your districts.
rural
Rural residential agricultural, yep.
Rural residential agriculture. Okay, I was almost there. I mean, that's most of your town. That's
Right,
it's a significant land area. So by only having it in that one district, it's not exactly exclusive.
right.
But sorry, where were we going with
Well,
this?
the
How do
mountain
other
district
towns
is
do
the
it?
only other.
Just like
So
examples.
an
of-
example that I won't use, but I'll use for the purpose of this conversation is mobile home parks
Yeah,
usually have a community water system and very frequently have shared septics,
right,
and it works. And I know that that's different, but in a lot of ways it's not. Yes, the structures are different and the spacing is tighter, but it's not always that tight. It's still, the park fees are essentially your homeowners association. And it works,
Yeah.
there's Pilgrim Pines over in Swansea and they have, I'm gonna get this wrong. I think there might be 100 units over there and every 3 units share a septic. And it works,
right.
I mean, so obviously we're not gonna lead with that because I know that's scary, but there's absolutely a way to make this work. And, you kind of see it in cluster developments, but cluster housing is not usually synonymous with workforce housing. So,
Yeah. Okay, I'm just curious because I think that a lot of time, like in the HOP grant work, we spent a lot of time talking about conceptual
yeah,
housing situations, but just without a lot of real,
right, real
Examples.
examples.
and so it's hard to talk about something with the town, right?
Yep.
If you can't actually show them
Right.
a real
Like a
example.
cottage development.
Well, yeah, we saw like the drawing of the cottage development, but like the idea of that, like, how could it actually work in a town like ours? And
I can think of another development in Swansea. Sorry, I know a lot of
Yeah,
developments there
no.
because I used to work in Swansea, but they put in, it wasn't a conservation development or a cluster development or anything like that, but it wound up looking like one because the constraints of the site, there were so many wetlands, there was only like this tiny little area in 12 acres where they could build anything.
Mhm.
And they built 2 duplexes and shared septic, shared water system. And, so 4 units on 12 acres is pretty much what we're looking at in your PRD ordinance. And so almost the entire site was untouched because, 4 units of housing, you know, it was 2 separate structures, so nothing needed to be sprinkled and, you know, they were built townhouse style. So they're next to each other like you would see in a, I don't want to say urban landscape because this was like out in the woods in Swansea. It was actually out where the Bell's septic lagoons used to be. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, I think you are. You might have even worked on that
Right.
project. Anyway, lagoons completely closed down, remediated, beautiful site. Anything will grow there. Anyway, so that could be something that I could potentially pull the plans from that and use that as a demonstration because that would actually work very well for a small scale of what we're talking about.
And is that workforce housing?
It could be because the units are pretty small.
What are those units?
I don't know if it actually qualifies because it wasn't built to be workforce
118,
housing.
just before you get to 202 and Ringe, one that they built.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Three
right in a
unit
row.
homes, and that's mixed use because it's commercial. in the
Yeah.
back.
mixed use, yeah.
They have like little playground next to it. and-
Yeah.
Yeah, Range has got a bunch of different, Matt, you had
Yeah. that's
alluded to
the
with some
Van
of the,
Dykes.
Van Dyke does a really nice job, but they don't really even look like condos.
Correct.
And Ringe doesn't have public water or sewer.
Right,
Yeah, so they made it work.
So
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
they made it work. So I'll remember to look at Ringe.
I mean, they're tastefully done. They're not,
Correct.
you
Yeah,
know, they don't, yeah,
They have 2 of them. They've got one going towards Swansea on the right,
yeah,
which is probably 20 units in there.
yeah,
And then that one that you were
Yeah.
referencing.
yeah.
Yeah.
and those aren't that expensive. I would think they would be sort of work for us because I know my kids were looking at renting there.
I think they were 22, 2,300 bucks a month.
Yeah.
So the thing, years ago, when we talked about this and it wasn't really well received, was we were trying to sell the fact that, you know, even just a duplex, just a simple duplex on a 3-acre lot, you know, which we don't allow, but, so 2 families, 1 driveway, not 2, 1 septic, not 2, 1 well, not 2, 1 foundation, not 2, 1 set of power telephone poles, not 2. That's green. You can't get much more green than that, well, except if you build a 4-unit or 5-unit workforce housing building and you save whatever the percentage is,
Right.
40% of the land to open space.
Yep.
So it's a compromise.
Yep.
Now you have conservation, you know, but yet now you're still, the carbon footprint is really small to get into that one building to have 4 or 5 families live.
Yep.
And it just scares people because they don't want to see a 4-unit building, but it really is better for the earth.
Mhm.
It's just trying to convince people that, you know,
well, I think part of the struggle that I have when we talk about these things is I just don't want all of our open space turned into many units, like, I think
Well,
that's hard to, so. I think that's also part of the struggle is like a lot of people in town, I think, might feel similarly to that, or. And it's not that I don't want to support workforce housing as I just have a hard time seeing like a nice hayfield turn
I
into
know,
a bunch of housing, so.
I agree.
That is my internal struggle with some of this.
It's a compromise.
And it's a compromise, right? And so and maybe it's like comes down to where you allow it and in town and finding some boundaries that can accommodate both.
What do they call that,
things.
overlay?
Like an overlay
Overlay
district,
district.
right?
We talked about that in the
Yeah.
past too, is, hey, we do not want this in this part of town and in this part of town, because we all think that this just looked like this forever, and rightfully so maybe, but, oh, hey, over here, this is a spot where we wouldn't mind doing that.
Right,
So you
right.
have an overlay.
And I
district,
think
yeah.
there's a lot of surrounding towns that have overlay districts to allow specific things like that.
Yep.
So I could, maybe that's just something, I'm just throwing out ideas of what other concerns might be, and,
Mhm.
I mean, I can 99% tell you that nobody, this village district here,
right,
nobody's gonna go for any workforce housing.
No.
That we have, we've had some old buildings turned into 3 apartments. That's about it's ever gonna be. But out on the outskirts of town somewhere, and it's not ruining a big field, and it's on a
yeah.
piece of
and
land where it could be hidden.
where-
and you wouldn't even know it's
Sure.
there,
Sure,
that might work.
That's what I keep thinking, not being from here for very long, is there someplace that could be zoned off or however one you
Yeah.
wanna word it, to support workforce housing. And then the next challenge, of course, is when you pick that spot, getting all the abutters to, to be on board with that, you know?
Well, just because you create something doesn't mean it happens, right? So
Yeah.
if you create an overlay district, you're just allowing, the planning board are not gonna go build
Yeah.
workforce housing, right? We're just allowing that to be done in a space. And that would happen over time, right?
And I would say that, my first instinct would be that would be hard to do. First of all, when I think workforce housing, the first thing that comes to mind is closer in the town, which is not what is.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is what anybody wants. But then, I just took my grandson to a neighborhood. I remember that, the town, but it was, development. It was just a loop, but it was out in the middle of nowhere. And you wouldn't, they were nice out, this was workers.
Yeah.
But, my point is it doesn't have to be an already developed area. If there's some place that could be opened up, some kind of land somewhere that's isn't developed. And turned into that, this is our overlay, and then if somebody wants to put workforce housing, that's where you put it.
Right.
I think, I think key thing, just a side note, it's actually not a side note, it's actually should be, first and foremost in the front of our mind. As we move forward talking about workforce housing, it's not a bad word.
No,
It actually
No.
is your hairdresser, it is your police
Yeah,
officer,
yeah.
it is your kid's school teacher,
Right.
it's
Mhm.
regular people like us.
it's part of.
So it's
every
not
community.
like it's, section 8. This is just a way of trying to have affordable housing
Yeah,
for the common folks, the people in your neighborhood. But also not ruin our rural character
right.
and what we love, and so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I find myself, I was gonna say earlier that the term workforce housing, to me, has a negative connotation.
I know.
And it's workforce. I'm part of the workforce.
Yeah, right.
I'm not part of the, I mean, I was part of the lower end workforce, now I'm in the upper end workforce. I'm still working.
Yeah.
But, and I have kids and grandkids that are, I have a granddaughter right now that's, giving up her place in Londonderry and coming to stay with us until she can find someplace affordable to live. And her boyfriend's looking for, he just got, side note, but he just got a job in Milford at his first day of work today, and as a cook. And the place, the lady who was supposed to train him cut a finger off.
Oh my
man.
Oh my God. Wow.
So she's based out of home.
Yeah.
He's had 2 jobs.
Oh my
He's trained out of certified college graduate. And the jobs were fraudulent. First one, the guy was a crook, so he got out of there.
We just gotta keep in mind, keep it in their mind as we move forward through this whole process, that the workforce housing is a good thing, it just is how we do it.
Well, and
It's
that
for-
can
it's
be-
for regular people.
That can be a big part of what we incorporate into the boards. Really paying attention to the messaging. So I'm glad you
Mention
brought that
all of
up.
Our kids that they can't, I've got 4 kids and 2 of them and their significant others have all gotten 1 apartment,
Mhm.
and then the other 2 got a house to rent in Keene, and all they have to do is pay taxes because it's somebody's grandmother.
Yeah.
And it's like.
I have an adult kid living at home right now and another one who's probably moving back in a month.
It's everywhere,
Yeah.
So how are we staying, I don't know how we are with the time, but do we digress, or is that was probably pretty good conversation we just had there, but.
I think
coming
that
off
was a
your-
really
off
good
your-
conversation. So
Jumping off your,
I'll revise this thing based on this conversation, but let's actually, it's 8:03. How much time do I have with you guys tonight?
well, I mean, really. We don't, as much as you want, we're not. Everything else we have is gonna be a quick conversation, I think.
Yeah.
So, whatever, that you wanna.
Okay, so I'd like it if we could go through the summary recommendations for the PRD revisions. And these were taken in large part review of the previous HOP work, but then also looking at how other communities have incorporated, you know, like density bonuses and that sort of thing to help encourage more affordable housing. And I kind of want to get your impressions and feedback to give me some direction so that at the next meeting, I should have some draft language for you guys to start reacting to so we can, you know, kind of make it work. So I guess we'll just go down the list if you guys are comfortable with that. Unless you had any initial reactions to it that you wanted to start with. Because some of the things that I captured, I'm not really sure that I understood them correctly reading through the previous hop work. So actually the first one we come to pretty quickly. So we'll start with the section purpose. The current one emphasizes flexibility, open space, rural character, and infrastructure efficiency. Recommended revision would expand it to include housing variety, climate resilience, sustainability, and workforce housing.
Can I just ask what document you're on? right
Oh,
now?
This
Sorry.
memo?
The memo.
The memo, okay.
Yep,
Okay,
the memo
good. Yeah.
for today,
Memo
and
dated May 6th.
Yeah, got it.
I didn't number the pages, so you're on your own with that. It's towards the end. Sorry about that. Note to self. So I think that, you know, changing the purpose in that way approximately,
I think it makes sense.
okay. So the next one, the minimum tract size, this is one that I took directly from the comments from the previous hop work. And there was a recommendation to increase the minimum tract size, which in some ways seems like counterintuitive to promoting more housing. However, that was the feedback, and I could also see how it might help an ordinance change go through because, you know, right now, best case scenario, you can have 2 units on 6 acres, and that's if the land is perfect. And those 2 units can be pretty close together because I believe the way the ordinance is currently written, you guys have discretion on the spacing of the units.
Okay.
So if, say, the minimum acreage were 10 acres and the land were perfect, you could have 3 housing units on 10 acres, but you would still have the option to have them clustered per your discretion as a board. And in that case, the nearest neighbor potentially is less likely to see 3 houses that are near together in the middle of 10 acres than 6. And I don't know if that is really how the conversation went in the previous hop work. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was a note.
I am trying a complete blank. Russ, do you
Yeah.
remember this conversation?
Yeah, well, I did in my own property, I had 9 acres. Right up by your house.
Yeah,
And I subdivided, I created a PRD. And there's now, and then I ended up selling it before I built another house on it, but. So there's open space and it's actually on the map, one of the maps you probably saw, it's probably the small, I think it's the smallest site plan, smallest PRD ever done in Temple. But when that was 9 acres, but it was just 2 houses. And they're spread apart from each other and there's open space. I just don't know,
Could I ask why you went with PRD rather than a traditional subdivision for that?
I didn't have the frontage.
Okay,
Yep. I didn't have the frontage and I couldn't afford my house anymore for a lot of reasons, but I wanted to stay living. It was a beautiful road and I had the land, so I got creative.
Yep.
And at the time, it was only like $7,500 to hire a guy like Russ to come in, do all the work, and I created a homeowners association. But anyway, the whole process worked, and I don't know, it was the perfect piece of land. It didn't have really any wetlands.
then it's just about perfect.
So I guess that's perfect. Yeah.
You had
Um,
slope on that. though.
But I did a little slope.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, I guess the planning board at the time approved it, so it's, but I guess I'm just trying to see what, if we went. If somebody else came up and had the same situation, they had 9 acres, then you're saying they wouldn't be able to do it. They'd have to have
Exactly.
that.
So your impression on this is very important. How would you feel about a change like that?
I don't know, maybe 6 is really too small, but
but does it matter if it's 6 or like if it stayed 6? you could, and if you had 10 acres, couldn't you still put 3 on it? Or would
Yeah,
you-
of course,
This is
of course.
so-
It's just,
So,
So this is just talking about minimum size, so.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want 3, and because I wanted privacy.
yep,
Um. But you're saying if we did it this way, that. You could actually have. You'd be, one of the options would be to have up to 3 units on 10 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, and even right now, you could have 3 units on 10
On 10
acres.
acres,
Yeah.
I guess then it doesn't. I'm
You
not
know,
sure it's
Couldn't you
needed to
leave the
change.
6? And couldn't you have 2? If you have 6 acres, you can have 2. If you have 10 acres, you can have 3.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So
Absolutely.
We shouldn't get rid of that 6 acre.
And that's what I'm asking is if you
Mhm.
guys,
yeah,
because that was in the previous hop work and I don't want to take us in the
Yeah.
wrong direction.
so, well, I mean, so the key is, I did the PRD, the only reason I did was, I had the acreage to do another lot.
Mhm.
Well, technically, I had 9 acres enough to do 3 lots, but.
Yeah.
But I didn't have frontage. So
Right.
PRD was the only remedy to be
Right.
able to have another house on that. And of course, now we have detached, well, no, that doesn't make sense, because I wanted to sell the other house, so. Yeah. that's
you
what we do
guys-
with ADUs.
Do not have a rear lot provision in your ordinance,
Like a back lot.
right?
No, I don't think we do. We have pre-existing non-conforming lots.
Yep.
But if they don't, right, yeah, exactly, but I don't know that there's no way unless there's an easement for a driveway.
And I
Right.
don't think we
No,
want
Yeah.
that, so. Like,
but-
Driveway
but-
easements or back
Back
there
lots,
are some,
But the
for
people
sure.
can't build on them because they can't get to them.
right?
usually with a backline, you get that either an easement
Get
or
it.
you get a 50-foot fee
Right.
Right,
piece that gets out.
Right.
Hammerhead.
hammerhead lots,
Nobody
it's
likes
like,
these guys.
all like
Nobody
all
does.
this,
What they
it's
make
like
sense.
hammerhead. I don't know, it's just not.
So anyway, I guess I question, like Matt,
So keep it at 6.
maybe for
We can
now.
absolutely work with that. This isn't a fight.
Yeah, yeah, no, just trying to see what's best.
It's your ordinance,
Mhm.
so I will have no hurt feelings if you don't like things on this list.
I
Okay.
do not like this next one.
Okay, frontage requirement, 300 feet on a class 5 or better road. Allow flexible frontage / backlot layout with strong buffering and internal roads. So you do not like this because you don't want the hammerheads. So part of this, what's everybody else's impression? What's the minimum frontage anywhere in town? Is it always 300?
Mhm.
500 in the mountain.
Yeah.
And 200 in the village, but there isn't really any land left here.
Okay,
So pretty much 90% of the town is 300 feet. Of frontage.
So we're not making, when we're doing a PRD, we're not making a town road?
you're potentially making a private road.
Okay, that's my thoughts. If you don't have enough frontage, you just make a town road, and then you're gonna have the subdivision out here anyways. But this is allowing you to say, maybe I only have 200 feet of frontage. We have a private road, and we have 20 acres out here anyway.
Right,
So
right.
like a place like
Yeah.
your place could actually do something. And the density would still be hardly anything.
And I don't know how you guys feel as a community about private roads. I know adding new public roads are not usually something any town wants. But also like the town of Stoddard, the majority of their roads are private, and that brings up different issues. So,
Our largest PRD, which is Randy Martin with the Stonegate, they're all private roads. And they're dirt roads, and they're better than some of our town dirt roads. They're really
Okay.
well built.
okay,
But the key is the homeowners
I was
association.
just gonna say that.
Yep.
Yeah, because so the homeowners association. Has to, hire somebody to maintain the road, to plow them, to grade them, and
Yeah.
they've been very successful over there at Stonegate with all their, I think they have. what
is
their-
that the
6 or 8
development on
houses.
Sarah Drive?
It's more than that.
Oh, well, the Sarah Drive's, it's another one, yeah, more than 6
Yeah.
or 8 in Timberdoodle, but Sarah Drive is that, that's a PRD,
Yeah, but it's a town road.
but it's a town road.
Town road.
That one's different. Yeah.
Okay. Where is the one you're talking about?
Sarah Drive?
Not
No.
Sarah Drive, the
Stonegate Road.
Stonegate, okay.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a clarifying question on this? So to make sure I'm understanding it right. So this is the frontage requirement for a PRD specifically currently has to have 300 feet
Yes,
of road just for the PRD, and then however it's divided up
correct.
from there. So then your recommend, or whatever, the discussion points here. So so when we say frontage back lot, are we just saying to having less than 300 feet for
Potentially,
that PRD?
yes. And everything in this table is specifically towards the PRD
Right,
ordinance, because I
right.
feel like we kind of need to see where that lands before we
Yeah.
figure out how to treat workforce housing.
Okay,
Well, where I think this would come in handy, and there's only a few I've looked at the tax maps several times over the years, there is a couple properties that have this situation. Where they have a dozen acres or 30 or 40 acres, but they only have 50 feet or 100 feet of frontage.
Yep.
So they have enough frontage to put a road in, so it's
exactly,
actually a perfect situation for a private road
right,
to get out to that land. Because at the moment, they can't build it, they don't have 300 feet of frontage. And the ZBA is not gonna give a variance on something that far off. If it was 275 feet, they might, but if you only have 50 feet, you have 30 acres. The PRD, if you didn't do the 300 foot, you could actually do it now. You could get back there and you could build one house or 2 or 3 houses.
yeah.
But that would be a big change. I don't know how that would be received.
Well, you definitely have to have the homeowners association or something, because they're
Oh, no.
a shared thing where everybody has to come up with money. Half of people never do. You get arguments all the time.
Yeah.
yeah, how does that even, like with the home HOA that you set up for your old house?
Laurel
Like,
pastures, yeah, I don't
does
know.
somebody manage that? Is that, how is that?
Yeah, there was an attorney involved and there's a whole
Implemented.
contract, and I
Yeah.
don't know from what I hear. The two people, they bicker a little bit and they break the rules. Cause I had a whole set of,
Okay, you had something laid out.
but I did, yeah,
Okay.
for maintenance of the road,
Yeah,
for the plowing, for the maintenance.
It must be like an escrow.
Write down that you can't target practice shooting, for a certain amount of hours, cause you could have a neighbor that wants to shoot all day outside, so I was very specific, couldn't run a dog kennel. I thought of all the things, cause I was gonna live there, so I wanted to make sure that I protected
see.
myself. But yeah, who enforces those homeowners associations? I don't know, it's a good question for maybe Nicole Concordia, because she's
in
in that one over at Randy's, and
I suspect that one's probably more like, well,
yeah, I think it is well managed, yeah, but
What's that?
People,
that?
like if they're wanting to invest in the buy a place, if there's a homeowners association, they have to. It's like part of their mortgage payment, they have to pitch in, or,
No,
No?
usually, no, HOAs are usually paid out of pocket,
so you could still not pay.
correct?
well, I guess we're digressing a little bit, but
Yeah.
so the 300 foot,
So this seems like something that would be a really good thing to get community input on, because it's
Yeah.
gonna
no
be,
doubt. Yep.
it's gonna be a sticky point,
Yeah.
so.
Some of the things we've done, like in the last batch of work we did too, just recently, with, saying refer to the ZBA. So this is what's allowed, but you might, with an exception for the ZBA, leave that door open for the zoning board to be able to make exceptions.
Oh,
might come into
have
play.
it, have the reduced frontage as a special exception,
Yeah,
potentially.
yep, so that way we're acknowledging that this could happen. We're not saying,
Yeah,
no, you could
treat
never
it
do
on a case by case
Yeah,
basis.
Right, that might be, I bet you that we will find from the town that'll be more acceptable than
Right.
us just saying, let it rip. That's my guess.
No, that's a good way to handle it, more measured. And people might be more comfortable with allowing that provision, knowing that there's more of a seatbelt on it. Okay, the next one, density calculation. Right now, it's just the net developable area divided by the minimum lot size. You guys don't require a formal yield plan, and some of Ivy's work, I think it was Ivy's work, there were notes that didn't have initials next to them on your ordinances that I received. you know, one of the notes was why require this? As someone who has worked in development, the yield plan is very important. You absolutely should require a yield plan. It doesn't matter if it costs the developer more money. It tells you exactly what the conditions of the site are. So you know if you are dealing with steep slopes, you know where the wetlands are, you know if there's an ephemeral stream running through the property. And then all of that not only can be protected because it's accounted for, but you're not developing more units on a piece of land that's not suitable for it. So my recommendation is absolutely to have a requirement for a yield plan. I don't know how you feel about that, but I will die on this stage. No, just kidding. I said you can disagree with me and you absolutely can, and I
Well, I
will
just
not
want to hear
take
what Russ
offense.
has to say, because he's in the field of, I mean, you have to do those plans. You're putting your stamp and your job on the line, saying that that these, I guess you could leave things out.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, but you know, it's your integrity.
Yeah.
So you're gonna say where the wetlands are, you're gonna say where the slopes are, it should be well spelled out on the plan.
The yield
So
plan.
why is the yield plan different? Yeah.
Well, what I'm doing, like, I'm working on one in Ware right now, and it's like 200 something acres, and the yield plan, they have I don't know, let's say it's 5 acres or something. So you come up with, you design a road quick, you design how many lots you put out there, say, this is what I could get. And then what you do is they give you a bonus, like, say it's 20%. You get a bunch of extra lots if you make them all really small and conserve most of the land.
Yep.
And get rid of most of the road, you know.
Yep.
You don't want to have a big long road. So.
Cause the road's a big expense.
Yeah.
It's
and
the killer for most built developers, right? Is the road.
That's the one that's
Yep.
eating up all the space and.
Yep.
So it's nice for someone like me to do the yield plan too, because then you know what you're working, and I don't think it's gonna cost extra. You have
It
to do
depends
it.
on how bad the site is.
Well, I
like
mean,
I-
the one I'm working on's got a ton of wetlands and a lot of steep slopes and, you had to do it anyways. So.
Sounds like
if you're
you had
gonna
a
do
pretty
it
bad
anyways-
site.
What's that?
Sounds like you had a pretty bad site.
Yeah, well, the whole frontage, except for like 100 feet with wetland, but there's all this beautiful land up at the top and, you know, it had already been hammered along, so it wasn't like pristine.
Right.
And there was just a lot of little swales and stuff and a lot of things that you had to map anyways, and really a lot of this stuff, like you can get New Hampshire LiDAR.
Yep.
And you can see where all the steep slopes are in a matter of minutes. You know, and you can kind of make a good guess where all the wetlands are because of that, and National Wetlands Inventory is gonna give you a little more clues, and then you go out there and you walk it. But you're gonna do that anyways for no matter what kind of subdivision you do, so. I don't think that's to say that it's gonna cost it somebody a whole lot more, and this is gonna stop development. Like, from my end, you do it anyways. So,
Yeah, I can't imagine why we wouldn't want that
Yeah.
as a consideration, right? Like as part of this.
yeah,
And if it's something you're kind of already doing, then
yeah,
it's not a
you
big
have to
lift.
defend where, you know, I would think unethical to also not see wetlands, so you could get,
Yeah,
Right.
you know,
yeah.
or not see the steep slopes. But I do wonder if maybe you say in here, density bonus for workforce housing, small units. It might be nice to see what kind of density bonus, because that would be the promoter of anything, because if,
Yeah.
you know,
So there's a few different ways you can handle the density bonus. Well, I mean, you could probably do it infinite different ways, but I've seen it in some communities, they allow increments of 5% for various metrics, you know, like maybe you get 5% because you have 50% less impervious surface because you've made your road smaller. You get 5% because you've put an additional 20% of your land into conservation. You get 5% because all of your units are less than 1,200 square feet. Or you get 5% because, I don't know, I'll throw it out there, 50% of your units are workforce housing. And then there will be a max of additional density, you know, and I haven't seen that max cap out higher than 25%. And I don't know that you guys would really want to go more than 25%. It seems like 20% is something that people are generally more comfortable with in rural communities because, you
how
know,
do you regulate or what would be the means, so you got a density bonus because you're saying you're doing small houses. How do you, is that,
How do you plan for that? Well,
then the builder comes along and says, yeah, well, that's one. He builds a big one.
oh, well, I don't know. So this is sort of where you kind of overlap site plan review with subdivision, and so if in my impression, and I could be very wrong with how this has worked in your community, but a PRD kind of goes hand in hand with a larger type of development, so like maybe you have 100 acres and you want to put 20 units on it. And so you're coming to the planning board and you're getting your permission to potentially subdivide it. I mean, but a PRD isn't necessarily a subdivision because you can have the homeowners association and I don't know, there's a lot of different ways you can kind of condo the land. And I don't know how you guys do it here.
You do that.
So like what I am imagining is a developer or an individual in the community that wants to develop their land would come in and they would show the layout. They would show the footprint of the houses and they would even have a plan for you showing you what they are building. And that would be the house that gets built because that would be what's on the site plan that gets approved.
Well, so I did that on my 9 acres. I came in with a rendering
Yeah,
of the 9 acres and the proposed site for the second house. And the area that would be open space.
yeah. And
Yeah.
your building
The
permit,
planning board said,
But you didn't build the second house.
I
right?
know I sold it before and your neighbor did.
Yeah, and so he bought it and built the house. Did he build it where you had?
He built it right where I was, well, kind of,
Proposing,
pretty
yeah.
close to where I was gonna build it. But so the thing was, I went in for the preliminary with the planning board before I went and spent all the money with the survey, I wanted to make sure, and they said, yeah, this looks on the surface like this is doable. So then I went and spent $7,500.
Yeah.
Probably double that now, nowadays, but, and then actually had it all, where, is there any wetlands, is this, did all the work. But that's how I did it.
So then it's kind of a hybrid subdivision site plan, PRD. So I haven't been part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't had any recent,
Yeah, we have it.
but we
So
will
as
have
part of
one,
the
right?
PRD, you're seeing what that
We
building
are
is
gonna-
gonna be.
We are going to have one.
Yeah,
I
we are.
can't really hear you.
I'm sorry. So as part of the PRD, then you're saying kind of what the structures are going to be and
Yes.
do people own the land? Is there a fee ownership of parcels or do they just sort of buy like a condo, buy the building?
It depends on the way they want it to be set up. I mean, it can be done either way. It can be condoed or it can be a homeowners association that, sort of owns the mother lot and the individuals own their subsection. I actually don't fully understand how that works, to be completely honest, but I've seen it done both ways.
The one we're working on, it's just a cluster subdivision, I guess. So they're little lots that you would own and
Yep.
build whatever house you want on it.
Oh, okay.
But you're getting the 80-something acres and open
Right.
space.
And then since the houses aren't already designed for that subdivision,
Right.
do they control the houses that go in just with setbacks on the little lots?
Yeah,
Okay.
so they get some reduction in setbacks. And I think that's really it. The lot basically has to support a septic system. That's the lot sizing is based on what DES says you need for a 4-bedroom. So if you had perfect sand, maybe it's 30,000 square feet.
Right,
But if
right.
it's like all wetlands, maybe you need, 3 acres.
right.
But each lot will be sized dependent on your septic system and your well.
Okay. And they're not doing any shared systems in there.
No, everyone's their own thing. So this is different and
Right. Right.
Yeah, and yeah, how would you share? I mean, I wouldn't,
I'm not
Yeah.
sure, do any of our PRDs in town have shared systems?
don't think they do,
Mm.
I don't think that they do.
no. Cause that gets complicated,
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
well, when the well goes dry, you both have to
Yeah.
pay to drill a new well. if, you know.
Somebody's dumping bleach down their toilet,
Yeah,
everybody
or
else is being.
They left the
cool
garden
about
hose
it.
on for a whole weekend and drained the well down, you know, so
Yeah.
I mean, it's too messy. Yeah, septic, same thing.
Yeah,
People are putting things in the septic they shouldn't, and the septic fails. I don't see that working. But, so the thing about the size of the homes and deciding what kind of homes get built. Tiny homes is a perfect example. We all know that's a big craze in America right now, and if you put a tiny home subdivision in, they would just sell like hotcakes, right? And, but the problem, the reason why they don't get built is because the builders can't make it as much money.
I saw,
They want, right?
I saw one on Coburn Road the other day.
Yeah, I know.
There's one on Coburn Road.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's permanent
Well,
though.
it's not supposed to be permanent, yeah. It's not supposed to be
Really?
permanent, yeah.
Yeah, but didn't it has, it looked like it had a septic.
it does.
It does, but they're gonna build a house right next to it.
Oh, okay.
But it does look like it, yeah, so. But the builders would rather build a $700,000 3-bedroom
course.
ranch, 1,800, and make 150, 200,000. If they build a tiny home, they're not gonna make enough money, and they're paying a lot for the land, because, you know,
Right.
land's $100,000 for a 3-acre lot, so.
That's why they get the
It's so
bonus density.
So that's why, yeah, so that's why we're having this conversation, right? So if we can figure out a way to make it so that, you know, a builder can actually be okay with it, you know, there has to be a trade-off.
Right, so
They have to sacrifice some land, but then we'll allow you to cluster, you know, do it.
yeah, so you could do tiny houses that have a common septic and common well. And have almost no setbacks on their little stuff, but. Tiny. You know,
Yeah.
It's just amazing to me how comfortable people are with tiny houses and they're not comfortable with mobile home parks.
Yeah. Good
'Cause
point.
they look a little different, but they're kind of the same.
It's just a mini version, same thing. Yeah. But it's the craze right now.
It's true, it's true. Okay, so on the density calculation one. With more work and thinking and finesse, is that generally something that you're interested in pursuing, is adding possible provisions for bonus density?
I would be,
I think should be open to it.
yeah,
I think so, if it comes with some of these other conditions like the smaller units and.
Okay.
Right, like, because to your point, we don't want to create the opportunity for
Right,
multi-million-dollar houses on small lots. That's not, I don't think that's what we're going for, right? So
Right.
we're going
Yeah.
for something that's affordable, right?
exactly.
So,
But also making it so that a PRD doesn't have to be affordable housing. Also,
Right.
which is why this is
Right.
bonus density, because this is not a workforce housing ordinance.
yeah, no, I,
But also with, you know, putting in provisions to reduce the housing size, it can create more affordable housing that isn't technically workforce
Sure.
housing. But it's still, you know, people can afford to live there, so. Okay, housing types allowed. This may be one where we get into trouble, but I don't know. So right now, this is sort of a sticky spot where your PRD conflicts with the workforce housing statute. Because the statute says you have to allow structures up to 5 units, but the PRD only allows single-family homes as it currently is written. And since that's the only place in town where you can have workforce housing, I don't really know how that works.
Great point.
But fortunately, nobody has brought that up as a conflict yet, I'm guessing. So I don't know how you want to manage 5-unit buildings, should they come knocking at your door. But I'm proposing to add other housing types and configurations to be allowable in the PRD.
so if you have, you know, if you have a PRD. Let's say you get, this is my 10 acres or my 20 acres, and I could fit 5 units. Would this be saying that instead of doing, we're not saying 5 different lots with 5 units each, we're saying no, 5 units just all in one structure.
Potentially.
Yeah, and that's the draft that I have from the board that I'll dig it up, I'll bring it in.
So it's a lot less footprint.
Oh yeah, it's a much smaller footprint. It's a much less expensive build because everything is smaller, you know, your driveways, your parking, your grass, you know, the whole developed area.
Right.
can just be an envelope with a driveway attached to it, essentially next to the structure. And the way the workforce housing statute is written, you're supposed to be allowing that currently. Whether anybody chooses to build it,
We're supposed to be allowing that in workforce housing.
yes.
So then what we're talking about, the PRD, even though I know our workforce housing is in the PRD, but
Well-
are we treating these, are we gonna be talking about these separately or together?
I guess a little bit of both. I mean, so right now, the only place where you can build workforce housing is in a PRD.
Right,
But you also can't build you can't fully
yeah,
build workforce housing there because the types of buildings that are allowable by state
Oh,
law
yeah.
are not allowed in your town.
right.
So this could be opening up these different housing types just exclusively for workforce housing within the PRD, or it could be opening up these different housing types because it will also likely open up more affordable housing within PRDs. Because when you share walls, you reduce building costs.
I think this is where the yield plan is beneficial. Because if you, and that would come up in the public hearing, if you show a yield plan that says, look, I can do 20 lots. But instead, I'm gonna do 4 lots, you have 5 units each, and they're all gonna be in this little thing here, and the rest of this is, you know, conserved. I mean, I would rather see 4 units than, this is personally, I would rather see 4 units than 20 lots.
Yeah.
And cutting all the ones down and,
Mhm.
you know, everybody makes their own little farm and their own little everything, and everybody loves to have that, but. Then it's not workforce housing really either, it's not affordable, because everybody's house becomes expensive.
Yeah, this mock that I have down the road, it's only a mile and a half down the road from here. The land has frontage on Route 45, Beltwell Hill and Hadley Highway. And I think it was enough land doing it that way with 300 feet of frontage on those 3 different roads. That you could build, I think it might have been 6 houses. So I think the mock-up had 2 driveways with 3-acre lots here, 2 driveways here, and then 2 here on 3 different roads. And then the option was workforce housing, 1 driveway coming in off 1 road into the 5 or 6 unit building, whatever it was.
That seems like a
So
much better.
Well, yeah, I know, so and again, it's less carbon footprint, it's less disturbing the earth, so and you can't see it, you wouldn't be able to see it, it was in the middle of the lot.
Yep.
So it's,
So I think, but the question is kind of, is this for all PRDs or is it for specifically workforce housing?
Yes.
However, that ends up looking in our zoning ordinance.
Right, and it could also be workforce housing having, I'm not quite sure how we're gonna dovetail it, right? It could just be a clause that points to your workforce housing ordinance, you know, so if you're building workforce housing, you're allowed to have up to 5 units in one structure, ...
Right,
But yeah, the question is whether this provision would be open for any type of housing in a PRD or exclusive to workforce housing.
I think it's a question we have to take to the town too, right? I think that, I mean, we could come up with some kind of response, but
Yes.
I think it requires discussion and input.
Good to investigate.
Well, that's good. Knowing to keep it on the table is,
so I was just gonna say. It's 8:37, what do we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 more topics here, I just don't know if we're gonna get through it
I don't think we're gonna get through it.
tonight, and we do have a few more things to talk about, so I'm wondering if we wanna. You wanna maybe do one more and then we'll. 'Cause I
Sure.
think we'd like to get out of here by 9, so.
Well, let's see,
We can do this one, that's easy. Subdivision prohibition.
Pick one, yeah.
the subdivision prohibition.
Sure, it says it can't be further subdivided and keep that.
Yep. Do you guys agree with that one?
Yes.
Yeah, pick some easy ones.
Good.
The open space wouldn't really be changing that much. Or it could if you wanted to, but we don't have to discuss changing percentages right now. 40% total open space, 50% of the open space must be developable. That's what you currently have. What we would do is just change the language to make sure that the open space is connected, so they're not taking like 100 square feet over here and
Oh, yeah.
13 over here, you know, like,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and there's also a potential opportunity to add in bonus provisions if there are wildlife corridors and that sort of thing that are going to be preserved because of the way that they lay out the development, but
Right.
you don't have to add more, you know, more opportunities for density bonus, but you can think like really get creative when you think about what you could put a density bonus as, because that's something that is going to be a larger conversation going down the road, because think about what you want to protect, think about what you want to see. And a great way to make that happen is with the density bonuses. And the buffer requirements, this is one that Todd and I kind of went back and forth on, and we'll end on this one. Right now you have a 35-foot perimeter buffer and 100 feet from existing dwellings. The HOP work talked about increasing the buffers, and I don't know if the way we've changed things in the site plan regulations, you know, regarding landscaping makes this unnecessary. But based on the previous HOP work, I'm recommending to increase the buffers to 50 feet at road frontages and requiring screening and preservation of natural features and views, mature trees and that sort of thing.
So if somebody did this in a, let's just say it was a 20-acre field with no trees in it, so then they'd be planting trees.
Looks like it.
In the front 50 feet? Is that what that means? Is it you're making like a 50
It depends
foot
on what would be, what's next door. Basically, what's around it. You know, if it's a field that's completely surrounded by trees, that's conservation land, then screening isn't necessary.
Am I reading this wrong? It says require screening preservation. Doesn't that imply existing?
I think the preservation is for the
overall
next
views.
overall view.
Yeah, there's a comma after screening.
So if it was an open field on the road and 20 acres, then yes, some trees would be planted between the development and the road if there's nothing. So that if it is a 5-unit building, it's softened.
Hmm.
And it's not just a 5-unit building standing in the middle of a field.
I would think you would almost want that almost a planning board discretion thing. Because if you had this nice big field, maybe, yeah, you put the unit right smack in the middle, your 5-unit building, that would be horrible. If it was placed maybe off to the side, but it's a nice field with a nice view of Monadnock, you don't want to put a whole bunch of trees that everyone drives by every day and sees the nice view, and now they, you know, there's a house over in the corner, but so it almost seems like you would want to. Yeah, so whatever's the nice thing about the lot.
Preservation of the rural.
Yeah.
Speaks to that without.
Yeah.
Contradicts it by putting trees up.
How are you defining mature trees? Okay. No, not tonight.
Okay, so where do we go from here, Sarah?
You can touch them all. Yeah. Listening about 100 years old.
And we've got how we're going to get input from other boards into all work that's happening, without having before any of the start festival. I don't know what the summer schedule is for everybody in town. June 3rd, continuing the security review, and we've been talking about workforce housing.
I should have some very, very graph presentation work ready for you in June meeting, depending on how far we get through the PRD. I can at least have boards that show what's allowed right now.
Right.
Finalize PRD hopefully at your June 17th meeting. Again, if you guys are open to just coming to all of your meetings before July happens. I don't know what business that you guys are expecting.
Right now, nothing.
Can always change, but yeah,
Changes quick.
yeah. I think it's probably fine, but unless it becomes suddenly busy.
Yeah. I'm pretending to have nothing.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
It does, I think. I just want to ask the board. So, guys, do we want to have Sarah just come in at 7 o'clock? And then just say, I mean, is an hour enough each time you come?
We'll work with what we have.
Yeah. I know I don't think we want to continually get out of here at 9 o'clock at night. It's usually after an hour and a half we've had it, but so if we tried to stick to an hour from 7 to 8, and then that gives us like, about a half hour to do our other business. And then, but you might be able to go a little longer if you're okay with that. Is the board okay with that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I would say yes.
Yeah.
7 o'clock. 7:05. After we do the minutes. Yeah, good. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, so I talked to Christine about this new business of Abutter definition.
Mhm.
I think what she basically said was we have to figure out whether or not, I don't know if you guys all have that
Yeah.
notice, but we've had it for a while. Basically, it's a definition of what a butter means. And I don't know, she just thought I should just ask you guys what you think. Is this something we need to adopt or to our zoning? What is everybody's thoughts on it?
Is this this is from the lawyer, right?
I believe, yeah.
This is a,
From Laura Spector,
Yeah.
Spector Morgan, our lawyer, yep. It was from October, so we kind of kicked the can on this.
Yeah.
right,
Uh,
but this is just quoting, this is RSA 672(3).
Yeah,
I
Yep.
mean, generally, I'm in favor of following what the definitions are defined by the state, right? Like regarding something like an abutter. So I don't know, do we define a butter somewhere already and that's different?
well, that's what I don't know, and
I didn't look it up, so
yeah,
I
I
can't do that
I
one.
didn't either. I don't think we're prepared to vote on it tonight. Kathy, we'll just have to keep it on the agenda. I think it's gonna be a quick conversation, but I know Christine was doing the homework on that, and I didn't.
Yeah, like, I don't know, but if it's in our zoning as something else.
Then we should
Then
amend
we
it.
should just amend it,
Amend
our
it,
zoning.
yeah. But if it's not, I'm trying to remember what Christine said to me. She said a lot. I didn't write it all
Right,
down.
if it's not.
If
in
it's
our
not in it, do we want to
zoning,
put it in our zoning
then- Yeah,
as a definition?
right.
Because I didn't she show us a case of over near the seacoast somewhere, one of the towns that had. What's in a butter?
Yeah.
Like kitty cornered, like over to there. Remember it was wasn't it like a Rite Aid or a
Yeah.
business or something?
Mhm.
If you remember that?
Well, I know what I
The
do.
reason why it became an issue because they were saying, well, we're a butter over there, but you're not really.
You're not really, you're just like.
You're within
eyesight.
100 feet of some point on my property, but you're not across the street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's,
You're like on
that's
that
why
radius.
this came up.
Yeah,
It doesn't make sense to me, the definition here, though. Well, they say across the street or across the stream is an abutter. Well, what about the landowner that's right next door to you and you're on the same side of the street? That's an abutter. What
Yeah.
about the land that's on the back of your lot?
right.
That's an abutter. This,
I think what they're trying to do, this is just a part of it. I think what they're trying to do is saying, how, like say you've got a lot directly across from you, but maybe he goes a little bit further. And then
With the
there's-
street in between.
Yeah,
Right.
and then there's this guy that's, if you measured from your pin, at an angle that way, he's within 100 feet, but he's
Mhm.
not directly across from you anymore. So I don't, it sounds like they're saying you don't have to include that guy on the diagonal.
On the
Right,
diag.
in Ben Fisk's case. Over on 101. The house that sits on 45, right across
yeah.
from there.
Yeah.
He'd go before the ZBA with that, and they really argued that a point. They measured that
The
over and
distance.
over,
Oh, right.
and they finally okayed it.
Yep, I remember that. That,
Yeah.
and it was bank owned at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
was
that
in
helped things out. That helped
bankruptcy
things out
or
for a while,
whatever.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I guess we'll, maybe do some homework on it if you guys want, and I'm sure we'll just keep it on the agenda for next meeting, and when Christine gets back, we'll see what we wanna do. So then, old business, Von Sneidern and Martin's, Mylars have both been signed. We have all the money. They're sitting at the office still,
No.
because Pete Caswell didn't sign one of them yet. So I don't know, who brings those to the registry down, but do we have any designated person?
I did last time, or Grace did, actually. But,
Yeah,
um,
we probably might as well wait until we get Pete to sign the other one and do them both at
yeah,
the same
don't
time.
think- yeah.
But we do, I guess maybe I'll make a call to Pete. We do need to, somebody needs to run to Nashua.
Because it's gonna be a time thing too. It's gonna be-
Oh, that, it is time sensitive?
so-
Yeah, I think you might be right. Okay. I'll see if I can call Pete and then we can figure out who wants to drive the Nashua. All-purpose storage, Carol received the plans and the Mylars and the check and all the
Oh,
stuff.
good.
So that's done. I don't know. The question is the registry of deeds. What did we decide on that? Were we gonna register that at the registry of deeds? I remember we talked about it, but we were like, well, it's not a regular subdivision like we normally would do.
We could try, but I don't think the registry will accept it.
'Cause it's-
It's not in the format, it doesn't meet the plat law.
Okay, that's why I remember the conversation. I remember we talked about it.
Sometimes
Yeah.
they'll let one fly, and sometimes you'll get there, and you'll be, I don't know, it just depends on who's the recording person.
Cause I thought we had a pretty good argument as to why we wanted to do it, didn't we? Carter? Wasn't there?
Well,
I recall the conversation and not where we ended up about,
I think we
Yeah.
wanted to make sure it was in perpetuity, some of these things that we made put on the plan.
right,
But then we talked about, well, at this point in time, it's not fair, then make them redraft all the plans because they don't meet the plat law,
Yeah,
'cause
we-
that wasn't part of something.
We
they
kind
had.
of, maybe like moving the goalpost in the middle of the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do, maybe make that a policy for future site plan reviews.
That's what I
But
thought.
we can't kind of make them do that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, that's where the conversation
Yeah.
went. So we probably should try to remember that, keep that on the, on an agenda, or not, maybe not an agenda item, but we should, in our minds or written somewhere that when we're thinking of changes to the zoning, that change, that registry of deeds change for site plan
Yeah,
projects
yeah.
might be a good thing to add. to it.
yeah.
Yeah. SolSmart, what do we, Jim, how's that going?
Everybody should have the slides from the meeting in the interest of time. You have the slides so you can see there's interesting nuggets in there. One thing I thought was interesting was that 65% of the costs associated with putting in solar system is not related to the 65% of the cost of solar PV system is not related to hardware. These soft costs can be reduced by action at the local level. It's permitting, inspection. I don't think it applies to us, but it's just, I thought that was interesting, but I was also trying to get a hold of Will. I sent him a couple emails and voicemails. He finally called me back today. We got cut off on the call, but I invited him to the May meeting and he declined.
Really?
I got no time for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Christine wanted me to bring that up tonight, that the May 22nd webinar, It's a what?
They would like to definitely have.
they want the they want the building
Building
inspector
inspector,
and
yeah.
the select board, right? That's what Christine said.
Yeah, the select board might have been part of that too, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead.
uh,
And the reason is to look at the permit application.
Yeah.
And zoning language.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so, what we're supposed to be looking at for May is draft the permitting checklist. Share that with the decision makers for approval, determine the process of posting the checklist online. Look at solar templates and examples. Begin to draft new zoning code language for your community to consider. And they do stress in this cohort, they have this timeline, but towns aren't required to follow their timeline. This is suggested guidance, and that's how their presentation's gonna be drafted, but if we slip, and table things to do later, like, I don't think we're prepared to draft a checklist in May, right?
Well, the select board routinely gets solar permits as a building permit,
Mhm.
so with Will's inspection, we okay them.
Yeah, well, right now it's him, right?
What's that?
Right now it's Will. Right?
Yeah, the select board has to
Right.
sign the permits.
And Will has to go do the
And we have
inspection.
to agree.
So I
Yes.
guess I'm just wondering.
And Will
with all due
does the
respect to Will,
inspection.
why, it's
It's-
pretty important, shouldn't it be important that he be up to date on
Yeah,
that?
I don't know what authority any of us have to.
Well, I know, I'm not telling him what to
Basically
do with his job, yeah, he probably has a good reason, yeah.
Straight out, I
Yeah.
can't take time. to
You
do
know,
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
could we,
He
could
is
we
actually
share something with him
signing
though?
up right now.
Is he having a hard time finding? out?
Yes.
What was that?
I'm just wondering if we can just, instead of him actually attending a meeting or something, can we share a
He-
draft of something
we got-
with him?
The call got dropped, and that was gonna be my follow-up to him.
Yeah.
Was that, I'll provide him,
Right,
whether he reads it or not.
yeah,
Yeah,
And I think, from my impression, or my thoughts on this is we're certainly not gonna be able to follow the timeline that they have,
yeah,
the way with the business we have now, but we can, take it and I don't know if we wanna add it to the agenda, but we can carry it and kind of decide whether we wanna work on the checklist at a later date. We'll have all the slides, is my point. We'll have all the documentation. I'll still keep attending, obviously, and participating and trying to, try and stay on top of what we can.
should we move that up in the agenda to be one of the key items that we allot time for in the next meeting or two? I don't think we have a lot of other things going on, so, basically Sarah. And then SolSmart,
Yeah, I think.
and
this-
that's the heart of our.
yeah, it'd be good to, like, if we're gonna do this,
We should
to
put some more time
do
I
it.
think the two things I think of, my personal opinion is, how far do we want to take it? In other words, here's what we have today. Here's what they're suggesting. Where do we want to roll into this, right? And then tackle the pieces, right? The checklist, if we need to change changes to the ordinance, whatever. Go from there. But yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that kind of stuff. I think that's a good idea. But
I've read all that stuff, and basically the select board makes sure it's within the setback. And we already have the building thing that you can't go over 40 feet.
Yeah, so
40
just
feet high.
treating it like a
Yes.
regular structure, if you can't go over
Like,
40 feet, you can't
build
be
a
more than
structure over
35 feet.
40
setback,
feet
so-
high. Ben Fisk was allowed to put 2 cupolas on his building over there.
Yeah, I think that's where they, the most help that they are for us, and then they're not gonna drop us after this cohort's over either. We'll still be able to submit stuff and say, hey, what do you guys think about 40 feet, right? So I think this just opens the door, gets us in. If we participate and do, the minimum required things, I don't think any of us care about the badges or whatever. But you're gonna come out with a bronze.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I do think it's definitely valuable, and I think we should certainly.
I think it's valuable. I drove by a solar array up north where my mom lives, and it was like maybe 10 feet from the road. It was like a third over their driveway. I'm like, what is this mess?
No regulation, yeah.
Like, it was, and it was huge. It was like this massive solar panel.
I just watched a video last night.
Yeah,
There's a new product out. And this is kind of, I guess you would say you put this on any place that has a flat roof. We don't have a whole lot of that here, I don't think, but they actually took your, the 2-inch by 4x8 concrete blocks. And that was the ballast that held the solar panels down.
Oh,
So it was a plate that goes like this, and you put the concrete thing down with the plate under it. And you attach the solar panel to that, and you have another plate that's a little bit lower, so you get the angle, and you just put them on the roof
Line 'em right up. Oh.
with cement.
That's
blocks.
scary. We do get 60-70 mile-an-hour winds sometimes.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah, just created a kite.
All that extra weight.
But that's this, and the guy that was presenting this video, his name is Will Krause, and he's all over solar, the technology and solar. And he was doing that to his building. He previously had it glued and screwed down, and he kept having leaks. So he kept trying to fix the leaks and he couldn't fix it, so he finally took all the panels off, all the racking off. Put a new, rubber cover on his roof, and he didn't want to screw down things again, so he put this product in.
yeah,
Well,
That can't look very good either.
Yeah.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
yes,
Second.
second.
Carrie already vote.
Yes.
I vote yes.
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 Oh, and Jim, thank you for all the hard work you're doing on that.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
I have-